Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today we have your spooky season TBR. These are books that I've already read and adore that I wish I was reading for the first time this spooky season, but I've already read them, I love them, and I think that if you haven't read any of these, you absolutely have to. They'll just put you like right into the spooky season vibe, so let's get into it. Beneath the Stairs follows this woman who's headed back to her hometown after years away. There's this like haunted house that nobody even like dares to step foot on. It's the scene of a crime from so many years ago. A man basically killed his entire family and then killed himself, and it's kind of been just abandoned and supposedly haunted ever since. Now this woman who's headed back into town, her best friend from like I think high school basically just recently went to that house and attempted to kill herself, and so now she's headed back to the hometown to try to just basically get to the bottom of like what's actually taking place at this house. Is it haunted? Trying to be there for her friend and also like confront this house with all of these secrets. What Lies in the Woods was such a creepy thriller book. I read this years ago, but I still think about it all the time. It follows these three best friends who 20 years ago, they were like 11 years old. They had this game that they play in the woods. It was called the Goddess game. It was basically like a make-believe game. They were imagining a world of wonder and like magic and all of that. And this like sanctuary that they had just absolutely shattered when one of them, her name was Naomi, was just brutally attacked in the woods. She was stabbed 17 times and miraculously she survived, and these three girls were able to basically say what happened, who did it, and they put that man behind bars. The guy they put away was a wanted serial killer. He had been accused of killing 6 other women, and they were heroes for this, but the problem is they were actually liars. And now all these years later, they're headed back into their hometown. One of the friends, Olivia, wants to tell the real story, but then she goes missing. And so Naomi, the girl who was attacked, she sets off into the woods basically to find out what actually happened all those years ago. The Last Word is one of the most jaw-dropping thrillers. Like, it's the type of thriller that every single page is keeping on your toes. It is like not necessarily plot twist after plot twist, but it is like your adrenaline is running as you're reading this. There are no slow parts of this book. This book follows Emma, who is basically living in isolation. She is house sitting at this old beachfront location. She's just there with her golden retriever, and the only human contact that she has is this elderly neighbor, and she's talked with him via text. And one day she's just reading this like random book on her Kindle. She really hated it, and she wrote a scathing 1-star review of this book online, and then she starts to have things happen at her house. She is convinced that after writing this review, this author is like hunting her down and trying to get revenge for that review. She had like a back and forth argument with the author about the review online before this happened, and this book seriously like horrifying because she's in an isolated location, and it legitimately, like, read this with the lights on or with somebody else home, because if you read this alone in the dark, like, I would be horrified. Next up we have Home Before Dark, which is such a fun like haunted house thriller book. It follows this woman who, as a kid, she grew up in this like supposedly haunted house. Her parents are always told tales of it. Her dad was like a famous author who wrote books about what happened in the house, but she never believed it because she never witnessed any of it, so she always considered it just like a money grab that her father wrote about, until she is now inheriting the house. She is kind of going there to start renovating and flipping it, and as she's there, things are happening that she can't explain, and she's starting to wonder if maybe her dad's stories were actually true and the house may or may not be haunted. Throughout the book, we get little snippets into her father's books too, which was a really fun little sneak peek. I love his books, and most of them are spooky season coded. I definitely have a couple of them in this pile, but this one, like haunted house, of course, that's spooky season. Next up is The Inmate, which is classic Frida. It's one of the first books I read of hers, and I absolutely love this one. It follows this woman named Brooke, who is a new nurse practitioner who just got hired at this like men's maximum security prison, and there's a few rules for her when she gets there. It's treat all prisoners with respect, never reveal any personal information because that could be very dangerous, and never ever become too friendly with the inmates. But she has a secret. Nobody in the prison knows this, but she knows one of the inmates, and she's actually the reason that that person is sitting in their cell. Her testimony single-handedly put him there. He was a star quarterback, they were high school sweethearts, and now he's spending the rest of his life with no parole at the prison, and this book is so twisty and I just loved it so much. Here we go with the second Riley Sager. This one is one of my favorites, even though I actually didn't rate this like the highest, because it is kind of ridiculous at times, and there's times that just you want to like hit your head with the book because the main character drives you insane, but the like story itself and the way that it's written, it sucked me in so much and I devoured it. It follows this woman in the 1990s who is desperate to get a ride home from her college. Her college has like basically a serial killer at it, and she wants to escape. It's like gonna be the holidays soon, so she puts information up on like a rideshare board and ends up taking a ride from a complete stranger in the 90s. There's no cell phones. She gets in his car in the middle of the night, and as she's driving, she's starting to see like little clues that make her start to wonder, am I actually in the car with the serial killer that I was trying to escape from? Like, that's could be the person I'm stuck with now with no way to escape. I'm in the middle of nowhere. and it is the most like heart-pounding book. And again, she's gonna make you mad sometimes when you're reading this because she makes some pretty stupid decisions, but overall this book was so solid, and the plot twist, like, it's one that will stick with me for forever. Then we have A Flicker in the Dark, which I love this author's books. I've read all of them, and this one I think is like my second favorite of hers. It's a very solid book. I know this is her most popular, but this one follows a woman who, when she was 12 years old, there were 6 teenage girls who went missing in her small town, and basically by the end of that summer, her dad confessed to it. He confessed to the crimes, he was put away for life, and now it's been a number of years. She has trying to move forward for 20 years now, and there's these crimes that are feeling very reminiscent of what happened all those years ago. She doesn't know if she's just going crazy and like seeing a connection where there isn't one, or if for the second time in her life, she's actually going to be the one to unmask the killer again. I just read this is actually her debut book, which makes sense now that I think about the timeline, but like what a crazy debut. Like this book was so good. Next up we have Don't Let Him In, which I loved. This Lisa Jewell book. It's a little bit on the longer side, but like what a phenomenal read. This book basically follows a bunch of different women who are all connected by the same con artist man. The main person that we're following, she just lost her husband recently. She's mourning the loss, and she has this random friend of her husband's that she's never met before kind of stop in to pay his respects and just talk a little bit, and they end up forming a friendship that develops into more. The daughter is really skeptical of him right away. She's starting to see like cracks in his story and wonder if he's really telling the truth about how he knew her father. And you as the reader know from the very beginning, because you're reading about all of his different like women and different timelines, that he is just a massive con artist who is weaseling his way into women's lives just to basically take their money, leave them high and dry, start over somewhere new with a completely fresh lie and a fresh life. And it drives you crazy as a reader because you know what's happening and you're like, you want them to wake up and realize that they're just being scammed. But it does have a really satisfying ending, and I just love this one. It's very, I want to say fast-paced because there's just crazy stuff happening all the time, but it's not like a thriller where somebody's like dying constantly or like crazy plot twists. It's just like the story moves in a way that you have to know what happens next. The next one we have is The Chain, which is one of the most unique thrillers and is so haunting. I'm not even a parent, but I can't even imagine like being a parent and having this happen to you. Basically, it follows this woman who just dropped her kid off at school. She's headed on for the rest of her day when she gets a phone call from somebody claiming that they have her kid in the back of their car, bound and gagged. The only way that that kid is going to make it out alive is if she pays a ransom and basically kidnaps someone else's kid, giving that parent the same requirements, extending this chain of kidnappings. If she doesn't follow these rules, or if she goes to the police, her daughter will die. And the stakes in this are obviously so high. This really just like jumps off the deep end because you start the book with that, and it is the most crazy thriller. I still remember very vividly. I started reading this when I was just like in line for a library book sale, and I had my headphones in and I was like, cool, a new thriller, and I was just sitting there like in a trance, just like so hooked into the story, and legitimately was sad when it was time to go into the book sale because I was like, I just want to sit here and listen to this for forever because it's such a crazy, wild thriller book that had such a chokehold on me. Next up we have One Dark Night by Hannah Ritchell. This one's a recent release. It just came out this year in August, and it is so spooky season coded. It's set in this very small British town where a group of teenagers basically met up in the woods on Halloween night. Where they met up is basically a place that is very steeped in local lore. It's called like Sally in the Woods, and it's called that because many years ago there was this woman who was supposed to get married that day, and basically her fiance killed her instead of them getting married. And so it's said that her like ghost haunts the area. And you really start this book off with a bang. You have a prologue where the kids are playing with a Ouija board in the woods right next to where this took place. And then your chapter 1 is some random driver driving and seeing like a blur pass in front of him that he's not sure if it's like an animal or what it is, that he swerves and you don't even know if he's okay. And you don't know what it was that caused him to have to do that until later in the book. And it's such a crazy, fun whodunit. You find out on like chapter 2 that a body of a teenager is found, and you're trying to get to the bottom as the reader of who did it, and it takes you on lots of little like kind of wild goose chases, like making you think something and then it's not that. And it was done really well. Like the details in this book were crazy. Looking back when you know what happens in the end and you see all the little things lined up so perfectly, was really impressive. Absolutely would read anything she writes. And I really like that this book has a map in it. I don't see that in like anything other than fantasy books normally, but it has a cute little map that tells you where everything is in the small town, and I just absolutely loved it. One of those teenagers that we really focus in on her family. Her dad's a detective and her mom is like the school counselor, and so you get lots of POVs from different people, but her family is like the main focus. Her parents are separated and there's lots of drama, and it's something that I liked a lot about this book is it wasn't just like a thriller. You were getting lots of family drama and dynamics between different characters in the book that really made it such a fun read. Next up is The Girls in the Cabin by Caleb Stevens. This is one of my favorite thrillers ever. I loved this book. If you haven't read this one, like this is top priority to me. This book follows a man who is trying to basically bond with his daughters. They recently lost his wife and their mom, and so he's taking them on like this camping trip, but they get stormed in. One of his daughters like wandered off and like sprained or broke an ankle, and so they're really trying to like just find somewhere to take shelter in because of the storm. And they stumble upon this little cabin in the woods thinking, this is perfect, we're finally gonna be safe, like we'll just wait out the storm here. There's a nice woman who opens the door and lets them in, like all should be well. But I'll leave you there, that's just the beginning of their nightmare. There's 2 timelines in this book where you're getting the backstory of like that cabin that they just stumbled into, and like seriously one of the most haunting books. It definitely is graphic at times, but such a phenomenal read. This book also follows a recent like widower. He lost his wife and he is a single parent now, and his daughters are claiming to have this imaginary friend. He thought it was pretty innocent at first until he's getting like more and more involved in their lives, and they're really claiming it's a real person, like a real man that they're basically talking to, and it's starting to freak him out. He ends up calling on Julia, which was like his wife's sister, who's a psychiatrist. He wants her to like basically rid the house of this presence, get the girls to like stop talking about this random like imaginary friend. But as he's doing that, he's also starting to have visions himself that's making him question whether there actually is this force that's poisoning his daughter's minds or whether it is made up. This book is just as creepy as this cover is, and it's a really short read, so it's perfect to just fly through. It's like 220 pages. Speaking of flying through a book, this is Too Scared to Sleep, which is a collection of short stories, but something that I loved about these is that each one has a QR code at the end where you scan it, and basically it takes you to a little like immersive video. They're pretty short, they're like, I think if I remember correctly, like 30 seconds or so, but you read this creepy story and then you like see it unfold, and it's such a fun like interactive way of reading that I have never seen done before, and I really enjoyed it. Next up we have Run Unread, which was reminiscent to me of Survive the Night just because of like the style of thriller. The storyline's not very similar. This one follows 2 women who I think are headed home from a party. They're kind of in the middle of nowhere. They're in like a rural country road. There's no cell signal, and they're noticing this truck has been like following them, and it's getting closer and closer and starting to drive kind of aggressively. They're getting concerned. It turns out he's trying to basically run them off the road. They're trying to escape, and this is all from like page 1. It's another book that is non-stop action. Like I read this one in one day. I was listening on audio to this one actually while I was packing to move, and I packed so much that day because I literally just didn't press pause from start to finish because I was so just enthralled by the story and invested and had to know what happened to these 2 women. Their situation becomes like more and more perilous, and there's multiple times throughout this book where I was like, there's no way they're actually gonna make it, right? And it worked out, obviously. Like I'm not gonna spoil anything, but the way it worked out made sense. But I ate up the story. This was a clear 5-star, and I'm super excited to read more from this author because this one was my first. Next up is The House Across the Lake. This is my last Riley Sager from this pile, but this one follows this woman who recently moved into her home, and she's kind of nosy. She's been like spying on her neighbors across the lake with binoculars. She's recently widowed, and she's been trying to escape like a streak of bad press, and so she's just like escaped to her small family town home in like Vermont. And that glamorous couple across the lake, they're like fun to spy on. The husband's a tech innovator and the wife is a model, but one day this woman who spies on her neighbor, she ends up saving that wife from drowning, and they start to develop a friendship together. And the more she gets to know this woman, the more she's realizing their marriage actually isn't as perfect as it seems, and when that woman disappears, she immediately suspects foul play from the husband. There's definitely more to this than meets the eye at first, and this story was unlike any of his other books, and I'll just leave it at that. The Stranger Upstairs is another like eerie, spooky haunted house type of book. It follows this therapist who basically just bought a gorgeous Victorian house. She got a great deal on it because it's the scene of a murder. She has a blog, and she's basically wanting to create a bunch of blog content, like re-renovating this like spooky house, and she thinks it'll be really popular content. And she's also just like struggling with a potentially failing marriage. These renovations aren't working as she would hope. Her marriage is still not going well, and her new neighbors seem to like really not like her. And there's a series of bizarre incidents and like threatening notes that she's getting. So she's starting to realize what everybody else already knew and warned her about. Something is like very wrong with this house. This one's also a super short book, so another one that you can just fly through. Next up we have Kill Show, which I have mixed feelings on only because I went into this, it says a true crime novel. I went into this thinking, cool, a true crime book. I read the whole thing and I was like, what a crazy story. How have I never heard of this? Like that's insane. And then I looked it up and it's not a true story. Novel. This was years ago. I have now learned novel means not true story. So a true crime fiction, basically. And I think that this is labeled poorly. Like they definitely make you believe on all parts of this book that it is 100% true crime, except for that little sneaky word novel. And I think that if I just read it knowing it was not true, I would have probably still loved it. And so that's why I have it in this pile. It's still a great recommendation because it was a crazy book, but I just read it thinking, what a crazy actual true story. And so I'm a little bit bitter because of that, but it is objectively an amazing story. Basically in this book, there was a disappearance 10 years ago of this 16-year-old named Sarah. She vanished without explanation and nobody was able to solve it despite like everybody trying their very best to figure out what happened. But now it's been 10 years and people are finally willing to speak. The 26 people who played a role in the events surrounding her disappearance are actually going to give their testimony. So this is like the story of what actually happened that night 10 years ago, and I loved it. The style of this book is written like true crime. You're getting the testimony of all those people, and it is a great story. So don't take me being bitter as a sign to not read this. Just read it knowing it's fiction, because otherwise it's like a little bit of a bummer. I shouldn't say a bummer, that sounds so wrong. I'm so glad this didn't happen to somebody. But like, I hope you know what I mean, where it's like you think you're reading a true story and then it's like not. It's just like a weird disconnect of like, I just spent hours of my life reading this thinking it was true and then it's not. Like it is not a bummer. I take that back. I'm happy it didn't happen. I just wish it said a fake true crime novel or something, I don't know. Or a fiction, I feel like it should say a fictional true crime novel. Next up we have Nowhere, which is like one of the most spooky season coded books I've ever read. This one is set in a small town. It has like a lot of Appalachian folklore and it has a lot of like family drama dynamics to this one too. It follows this like family that's kind of broken right now. They end up losing their son in a tragic accident. The wife blames the husband because he was under the influence while he was driving and they tragically lost their son. Of course the husband like also blames himself. It's a very broken family. They have 2 other daughters and they're just really struggling in life right now. The wife is a detective in the town and she's starting to get weird calls. There's seemingly like a force in the woods that's calling to children. Children are going in and either not coming back or they're coming back completely different. There's a lot of disturbing crimes that are like rocking this very tight-knit community, and this is a horror book, not a thriller, so keep that in mind. Like a lot of thrillers don't have the dark kind of ending that this one is gonna have, but like I've read this twice and it's a story that really stuck with me because it's such a good like not only horror book, but just the family dynamics in this one are just a really good like exploration of what grief looks like. Next up we have Appetite for Innocence, which I was like trying to summarize and think of ways that will not, I don't know if YouTube's super strict with like certain words like other social media platforms are, but I'm just to be safe not going to give you basically that first blurb. Basically there's a really bad person who kidnaps and is a horrible individual to young girls, and nobody's ever escaped from him alive until Ella. She basically risks everything to escape, trying to set free all of the other girls there. The only person that also gets free is Sarah. She's the girl who's been captive the longest. Of course, the girls are hospitalized, surrounded by FBI. They're trying to do everything they can to get to the bottom of what happened and where that man is now. But Sarah has a secret and Ella starts to realize that her nightmare is not over. Crazy dark book. Like if you think you like dark books, still check the content warnings for this one because it's probably the darkest book I've ever read. But it is spectacular. If you haven't read Lucinda Berry, highly recommend. Next up is Don't Look for Me. I read this book years ago and it was such an amazing thriller book. This book follows a woman who was said to be a walkaway. It's what cops call like a woman who just kind of wants to escape her life and start completely fresh. She abandoned her car miles from home. There was a note at a nearby hotel, the shattered family, like it happens all the time. Women disappear, desperate to start over. And so that's what's said to have happened to this woman named Molly Clark, but her family doesn't believe it. She had no reason to do this and she had no signs that would have pointed towards like it making sense for her to have done so. Now you get her perspective pretty much right away. I think she was driving like to or from visiting her son at college and she ended up running out of gas. A man offered her a ride to safety, but when the doors locked in the car, she realized she made a terrible mistake. So you get multiple POVs with her kind of trying to escape and getting taken, and then you also get her family who is trying to uncover what happened when the police are quick to rule this off as the woman just running away. And then lastly we have Night Watching, and this one was very, very haunting. I listened to this one on audio and this one made like the hairs on the back of my neck raise, like it made me look over my shoulder, like every little noise in my house creeped me out for probably a solid week after reading this one. It follows a single mother. It's in the middle of a blizzard. She's just like retucked her son back into bed in the middle of the night after he woke up, and as she's doing that she hears a very distinct noise in her house. She lives in an old house that creaks all the time, but this specific noise is very distinctly the noise of somebody's footstep on like a specific stair that creaks on the landing. She knows there's somebody in her home, but she also knows her children are in bed, and so she knows there's an intruder, and this is the most wild story where she's trying to protect her children. There's a tiny like secret compartment that's hidden in their home that she immediately takes them to, as she knows that the stranger in her home is like desperately trying to hunt them down. There was just a noise outside and I'm like horrified just reliving this story in my mind. Like that's how scary this one is, at least to me. I don't know, it's such a fear of mine in general, being like home alone at night. So for that to be the case for this woman and to read all the like terrible things, like it's a scary one, but it's a phenomenal thriller. And there we have it. I'm not going to pick them all back up because I will probably drop them, but I think that was 21 thriller books that I highly recommend reading during spooky season because they are just the perfect fall reads. If you've read any of these already, I'd love to hear your thoughts on them because these were all top tier for me. I don't think I rated any of these under 4 stars. And just talking about these makes me want to reread them. So I probably will select a couple to reread. I think like Survive the Night I read couple of years ago, and talking about it again made me want to reread the story, even though I already know the twists. I know it seems silly to reread thrillers, but it's fun anyways. Even if you know what's gonna happen, it's still a wild ride to go through. So yeah, let me know if you've read any of these, and also I'd love to hear if you're adding any of these to your TBR. And thank you so much for watching. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of my weekly videos, and I'll see you guys in the next video.